The Lord be with you, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to this third episode entitled The Parable of the Bride and the Wedding Cake. There was a bride who was getting married. So she invited her brother in the Gulf for her wedding. He could not come since he was getting a long leave of 2 months. And if he would come for the wedding, it would mean extending his holidays. So what the bride does is, after the wedding, she keeps a piece of a wedding cake in the refrigerator. Unfortunately, after a gap of a week or so, there's a big misunderstanding between the new bride and the groom. The bride was so upset that she remained cold and aloof from her husband to the extent of sleeping in another room. However, as Providence would have it, she happened to go to the refrigerator, and on opening it, her eyes fell on the wedding cake, her wedding cake. Immediately, pleasant and joyful memories of her wedding day flooded her mind. She thought of her wedding gown, her makeup, the bouquet of flowers, the bridesmaid, the bridal car, the flower girls, the wedding guests, the celebration in the church, the reception, the bouquet of flowers, the gifts. She was transported to a world of romance and beauty. Mind you, she was not getting married again. What came back was the wedding experience, the wedding day experience. And she wondered, why spoil these memorable moments by a resentful attitude? So she resolved to clear the air. She begged forgiveness of her husband. To bring home this point, let us imagine now that there is a maid working in the house of the bride. This maid has also had a big argument with her husband and is not in talking terms with him for some days. Now she comes to the refrigerator and sees the bride's wedding cake. What will be her reaction? Will she also decide to forgive her husband? Certainly not, because that cake meant nothing to her. Jesus stays in the Blessed Sacrament for the sick and the dying. And we too are sick and dying. He is not there as a relic, nor is he there static, lonely, and awaiting our homage, as if he was in a glass cage. He is not a prisoner. We are. He is there to continue the purpose of the celebration of the Eucharist. He continues to be with us as he promised, I will be with you all days till the end of the world. The prayer before the Blessed Sacrament is not an other devotion, but a continuation of the celebration of the Eucharist, where we come together to continue together our adoration, our giving thanks, our praise, asking for pardon, praying for others, just as we would do in every Eucharist. That is why the monstrance containing the sacred host is placed on the altar where the Eucharist is celebrated. Praying before the Blessed Sacrament, therefore, is not about saying prayers before the Blessed Sacrament. Why do you need the Blessed Sacrament exposed for that? Nor does it mean listening to a talk or giving a teaching while the Blessed Sacrament is exposed. There are clear guidelines given by the Church as to how we need to expose and conduct ourselves before the Blessed Sacrament. The purpose of praying before the Blessed Sacrament is to continue to deepen our intimacy with Jesus begun at communion. The parable of the bride and the wedding cake, therefore, is a wonderful story to help us understand how to pray before the Blessed Sacrament. How then can prayer before the Blessed Sacrament transform us as the wedding cake transformed the bride? So here is some kind of a format. The bride opens the refrigerator and sees her wedding cake. Applying this to praying before the Blessed Sacrament, we start with a song of praise when bringing the Blessed Sacrament to the table where the celebration has taken place. This helps us to magnify the Lord and thus sense the presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. We get ready for worship next, and we sing the chorus of the same song slowly and with a low voice gradually. And finally we keep silent to hear Jesus speak to us in the first person, like, "My children, I love to be with you. I know everything that is happening to you. I can feel your pain, your anxiety, etc." The purpose, therefore, is to make you feel at home in His presence. Next, when the bride sees the cake in the refrigerator, the wedding cake begins to act on the mind and the feelings and the memory of the bride. Applying this to praying before the Blessed Sacrament, you next share with Jesus your raw feelings of loneliness or anger, just as the two disciples on the way to Emmaus shared their disappointment and frustration to the stranger, who actually was Jesus, about not seeing Jesus since the last 3 days after His death. The wedding cake speaks to the bride, inquiring from her as to why she was spoiling the wonderful experience of her wedding day, convincing her to forgive her husband. Applying this to prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, we may keep silent now to hear Jesus referring to a similar experience in His life from the Gospels and giving you His insight into your disturbed feeling. This is when the stranger goes to the Scriptures to make them aware of why Jesus had to die to give life. So suppose you're in a turmoil. You can go refer to Jesus, maybe sleeping a fast in the midst of a fierce storm. Or if you have a resentment against somebody, you can refer to what Jesus said in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, verse 44 and following. And also what He said, "I make the sun shine and the rain fall on the good and on the bad. What more are you doing than others?" Next, the bride is convinced that she should forgive her husband, just as the two disciples on the way to Emmaus recognized Jesus in the breaking of the bread and ran to tell others that they had seen Jesus. So when praying before the Blessed Sacrament at this moment, make the attitude of Jesus you have reflected, that He shared with you, your very own. Maybe you could put it in the form of a mantra like, "I am not alone, the Father is with me," if you're going through a bout of loneliness. You take your cue from the scriptural reference Jesus makes when He's sharing His insight with you. As I said, if you're in a turmoil, you can feel the total abandonment of Jesus in the boat, abandoned Himself to the Father and not one bit bothered about the fierce storms around Him. Or if you have that relationship that has gone sour, you can understand what Jesus says, "I make the rain fall on the good and the sunshine on the bad. What more are you doing than others?" By way of conclusion, you pray for others going through a similar experience, and you end the prayer before the Blessed Sacrament with a song of praise and thanks. This parable on the bride and the wedding cake brings out quite clearly what the Eucharist is as a memorial, what it really means as a memorial. The bride, who is in a huff, goes to the refrigerator and sees her wedding cake, because of which all the experience of the wedding day, which has already taken place a week or so ago, becomes present at that moment, and she's inspired to forgive her husband. So you could use this format of praying before the Blessed Sacrament, keeping as the bride and the wedding cake at the back of your minds, and apply this to your personal life, personal prayer, praying with others before the Blessed Sacrament or in church, where you will see the power of praying before the Blessed Sacrament, which is nothing else but a dialogue and listening between you and Jesus. So we look forward now to the next episode, in which we will try to see how wonderful God has a message for you which will uplift your spirits. God bless.